Some secrets don't scream, they whisper. Softly, like a message notification at midnight when your husband is snoring beside you and the house is wrapped in silence. That's how it started, with a single message from Marcus. It had been over a decade since I last saw him. We went to college together. He was the guy everyone liked, the one who made you feel seen in a crowded room. Back then, we had our little flirtations, but it never turned into anything serious. Life moved on. I married Daniel. He married someone else. We grew up, had kids, built families. But when I saw his name flash across my screen that night, my stomach did a little twist. Hey stranger, just saw your profile pop up. You haven't changed a bit. Just like that, the world around me shifted a little. I smiled before I could stop myself. I typed back, "Well, that's generous of you. I feel like I've aged 20 years." He replied with a laughing emoji and then added, "Still beautiful, though." That compliment stayed with me. It lingered longer than it should have. You see, my husband, Daniel, is a good man. A hardworking man. But somewhere between the meetings, the deadlines, the late-night business trips, and the bills, he forgot how to look at me like I was more than just a wife and a mom. The romance dried up. The touches grew rare. Conversations became logistics, groceries, kids' schedules, oil changes. I wasn't unhappy, not exactly. But I wasn't alive either. So when Marcus started chatting with me every night, I didn't stop him. I let him in. It started with harmless jokes and memories. We talked about old dorm stories, mutual friends, music. But within a week, the tone changed. "Ever think about how things might have been different?" he asked once. I knew exactly what he meant. "Sometimes," I replied, heart racing. I didn't tell Daniel. Of course not. Why would I? I convinced myself it was just chatting. Nothing physical. Nothing real. But my heart was doing cartwheels every time Marcus messaged. My body would light up like it hadn't in years. I felt wanted. One Tuesday afternoon, Marcus suggested we meet for coffee. I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed, "Just coffee." He sent back a wink. "Just coffee." We met at a small cafe, just outside the city. I wore a blouse I hadn't touched in months, applied a little lipstick I used to love, and spritzed on a perfume Daniel gave me 5 anniversaries ago, but hadn't noticed in years. Marcus looked older, sure, but he wore time well. Salt and pepper beard, eyes that still had that mischievous glint. When he smiled, my knees felt weak. We hugged. It lingered. For an hour, we talked like no time had passed. He made me laugh, really laugh. The kind that came from my chest, not my throat. I forgot how good it felt to be seen. As we stood to leave, he touched my hand gently and said, "You still make my heart skip." I didn't answer. I just smiled. That night, I lay next to Daniel in bed, staring at the ceiling. He was turned away, phone in hand, probably reading some business article. I reached over and rubbed his shoulder just to feel some connection. He mumbled something unintelligible and turned off the lamp. And there I was in the dark, thinking about Marcus's eyes, his touch, his voice. I knew it was wrong. I'm not naive. I knew the slope I was standing on was slippery, and I was wearing heels. But I also knew I hadn't felt that alive in years. That night I texted Marcus, "I can't stop thinking about today." He replied instantly, "Neither can I." I sat there, holding my phone, thinking about everything. About the vows I made. About the woman I used to be. About the woman I was becoming. And still I didn't stop. Sometimes the thing you crave most is the thing you know will burn you. I want to pause here and say something to anyone listening who's ever been tempted, who's ever stood at the edge of something dangerous, staring down into the heat. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or forgotten in your own home, hit that like button. Subscribe, because this story, it's just getting started. And trust me, it gets messier. The days that followed blurred into a dance of deception and desire. I was still playing the role of a wife, cooking dinner, folding laundry, texting Daniel reminders about his meetings, but inside, my heart was somewhere else. My thoughts were with Marcus. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual. His tie was loosened, face tired. He kissed my cheek out of habit, and I flinched. Guilt had settled into my skin like a second layer. "You okay?" he asked, giving me a curious look. "Yeah," I said too quickly. Just tired. He nodded, walked past me, and poured himself a drink. That was our rhythm now, passing like ghosts in the hallways of a house we built together. I watched him that night, really watched him. The man who once made my world spin. The man I promised forever to. And I wondered, was I doing this because I didn't love him anymore? Or was I doing it because I wanted to feel something again? I didn't have the answer. But I knew the question scared me. It only took one message, one digital whisper, for everything to begin unraveling. And as I sat there in my kitchen late at night, texting Marcus under the table while Daniel sipped his whiskey a few feet away, I realized something chilling. I was playing with fire, and the house I was burning down was my own. The first time Marcus kissed me, it was raining. I'd lied to Daniel and told him I had a late meeting at work. The guilt of it sat heavy in my stomach, but the pull toward Marcus was stronger. I told myself it was just dinner, just catching up with an old friend. But the way I dressed said otherwise. A black dress I hadn't worn in years, the heels Daniel once said made my legs look amazing, and the perfume Marcus had complimented at the cafe. I was dressing for attention, for validation, for danger. We met at a little Italian place tucked into the corner of a quiet street. Candlelit, intimate, the kind of place where secrets are safe in shadows. He stood up when I walked in, pulled out my chair. He looked at me like I was the only woman in the world, like I was art. "Wow," he whispered. "You didn't tell me you'd be this beautiful." I smiled, cheeks flushing in a way they hadn't in years. Dinner was laughter, long glances and subtle touches. His fingers brushed mine when he passed the wine. His knee grazed mine under the table. I was drowning in something dangerous, and I didn't want to come up for air. Afterward, we walked out into the street. Rain had started to fall, soft and cold. I didn't have an umbrella. Neither did he. But we didn't run. We walked slowly, like we were in a movie. Like time had slowed down just for us. And then, under a flickering streetlight, Marcus stopped walking. He turned to me, his hands trembling slightly as he touched my face. "Claire," he whispered, "I've wanted to do this since college." I should have stopped him. I should have said no. I should have remembered Daniel's face, his laugh, our wedding vows. But I didn't. Marcus kissed me, and I kissed him back. Afterward, we stood there in silence, the rain soaking through our clothes, our breaths mingling. "I should go," I whispered. "Come with me," he said. I shook my head, heart pounding. "I can't. Not yet." He nodded. "But soon." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We both knew the door had been opened, and neither of us was ready to close it. That night, back home, I stripped off my wet clothes and stood in the shower until my skin turned red. I kept scrubbing, as if I could wash off the guilt, as if soap could undo what I had done. Daniel was already asleep when I slipped into bed. I watched him for a moment, his chest rising and falling, his hand curled slightly under the pillow. He looked peaceful, trusting. My heart shattered, but the worst part, a piece of me didn't feel sorry. A piece of me felt alive. The affair escalated fast. We started meeting weekly, sometimes at hotels, sometimes at his apartment when his kids were with their mom. I made excuses Daniel never questioned. He'd gotten so used to me being busy that he didn't even blink when I said I had extra shifts or needed me time. Funny how easy it is to lie when the other person isn't looking for the truth. Marcus made me feel like a woman again. Not a wife, not a mother, a woman. Desired, worshipped, heard. We talked about everything, about who we used to be, who we had become. He kissed me like I mattered. He touched me like he knew my body better than I did. But in between the highs, the guilt gnawed at me. It crept in during quiet moments. In the car on the way home. In the shower. In the way my son's eyes looked just like Daniel's. Every laugh, every smile with Marcus had a shadow behind it. I was falling in love with a man who wasn't mine. And I was losing myself in the process. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel suggested we go for a drive. "Just the two of us." "We haven't done that in a while," he said, reaching for my hand. I hesitated, half expecting him to pull away from me like I deserved, but he didn't. His fingers wrapped around mine like old times. We drove in silence for a bit. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Are you happy, Claire?" My chest tightened. "Why would you ask that?" I replied, avoiding his eyes. "You've been distant lately. Quiet. different. I thought maybe it was stress, but it's more than that. I looked out the window. The trees were starting to change color. Autumn creeping in. Everything dying slowly and beautifully. I don't know, I said honestly. Daniel nodded, staring straight ahead. If there's something you need to tell me. There isn't, I said quickly. Too quickly. He didn't push. He just nodded again. And that scared me more than anything. Because when someone stops questioning, it usually means they've already started suspecting. Later that night, Marcus texted me. I want more. I'm tired of sneaking around. I stared at the message, heart racing. Asterisk, what are you saying? I replied. Leave him. Be with me. I dropped the phone. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just flirting anymore. This wasn't an escape. It was real. And real had consequences. I didn't reply that night. Instead, I lay in bed beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling, wondering when my life had become unrecognizable. If you've ever been caught between loyalty and longing, between who you are and who you used to be, take a second, like this video and subscribe. Because sometimes the story you're hearing might just be the one you're living. And believe me, the next part, it gets darker. You never forget the moment your world shatters. Mine happened on a Tuesday. I was standing in the kitchen, cutting vegetables for dinner. The sound of the knife hitting the cutting board, the faint hum of the dishwasher, and my phone buzzing beside the sink, it all seemed ordinary. But one message, just one careless message, turned my ordinary into a nightmare. Marcus, last night was everything. I wish I could wake up next to you every morning. I froze. The knife slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. Daniel was home early that day, and my phone wasn't in my hand, it was on the counter. Unlocked. Open. Sitting right where he could see it. And he did. I turned. Slowly. He was standing at the edge of the kitchen, eyes fixed on the screen, face blank. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. He didn't yell. He didn't move. He just looked at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. Claire, he said finally, voice low and cold. What the hell is this? It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I felt dizzy, my hands shaking. It's not what it looks like, I said, the cliché falling out of my mouth before I could stop it. Daniel stared at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, pure heartbreak. It was worse than anger. It was devastation. Don't insult me, he said, voice cracking. Who is Marcus? I hesitated, and in that hesitation I gave myself away. He's an old friend. Daniel laughed bitterly, rubbing his hand down his face like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. An old friend? So you're sleeping with an old friend. I didn't mean for it to happen, I whispered. But it did happen, he snapped. Didn't it? I nodded. My throat tightened, so hard I could barely breathe. Yes. That one word was all it took. He backed away like I'd hit him. How long? I stared at the floor. A few months. He turned his back, his fists clenched so tight I thought he might punch the wall. Do you love him? He asked without turning around. Silence. I couldn't lie. Not now. I don't know. He turned around, his face a mix of disbelief and fury. You don't know? Claire, we have a life. A son. A marriage. And you don't know if you love the man you've been screwing behind my back. Tears spilled down my cheeks, but I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't beg, because part of me knew I didn't deserve it. The days after were a blur. Daniel moved into the guest room that night. The next day, he told our son he was working late and avoided me as much as he could. I tried to give him space, tried to figure out what to say, but nothing felt right. Nothing felt enough. Marcus kept calling, kept texting. What happened? Did he find out? Do you want me to come over? I didn't reply, because for the first time, I wasn't sure what I wanted. All I could think about was Daniel, his silence, his pain, the weight of what I had destroyed. 3 nights later, he finally spoke. We were in the living room. I was curled up on the couch, the TV playing some show I wasn't watching. Daniel walked in, sat across from me, and just stared. I need to know something, he said. I sat up, nervous. What? Why? I looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't just hurt. He was broken. And I had done that. I felt invisible, I said. I felt like I was fading, like I was just existing. Every day was the same. You stopped looking at me like you used to. We stopped talking about us. It was always bills, school runs, grocery lists. I miss feeling wanted. I miss being seen. Daniel nodded slowly. So instead of talking to me, you let some guy from your past fill in the cracks. I didn't plan it, I whispered. It just happened. That's the thing, Claire. Affairs don't just happen. You made 100 choices to get to that kiss. To that bed. To that lie. He was right. Every text. Every secret meetup. Every excuse. I had chosen them. Over him. Over our son. Over the life we built. I slept in our bed that night. Alone. The sheets still smelled like Daniel's cologne. Around 2 a.m., I sat up and texted Marcus. I can't do this anymore. Don't call me. I turned off my phone and threw it in the drawer. It was over. But the damage was done. The next morning, Daniel handed me a manila envelope before heading out. What's this? I asked, heart pounding. He didn't look at me. Counseling info. If you want to try. I'm not saying I forgive you. But if you want to fight for this, that's where it starts. I clutched the envelope like it was a lifeline. I do, I said. I want to fight. He nodded once. Then he walked out the door. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the smallest flicker of hope. If you've ever made a mistake that nearly cost you everything, if you know the weight of guilt, of regret, of betrayal, then you understand how hard it is to face yourself in the mirror. And if you're still here with me, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Because the road to redemption is never easy, but it's one hell of a story. Some people say once trust is broken, it can never be repaired. I used to believe that, too, until I had no choice but to fight for the pieces of what I broke. Daniel and I started counseling 2 weeks after the envelope. I remember sitting in that beige room with 2 soft couches and a therapist who looked at us like we were puzzle pieces that didn't fit anymore. In the beginning, we didn't speak much. When we did, it hurt. I still can't sleep, Daniel said during our first session. I see her with him when I close my eyes. The words made my chest ache, but I didn't interrupt. That was part of the process. I had to learn how to listen, even when it gutted me. The therapist turned to me. Claire, what do you feel when you hear that? Shame, guilt, regret, self-hatred, all of it. I hate myself for doing this to him, I said. I hate that he has to look at me and see pain. Daniel didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor, like if he looked at me for too long, he'd crumble. Back at home, things were strained. We were coexisting, sleeping in the same bed, but oceans apart. We didn't touch, didn't joke, didn't make love, but there were signs, tiny, fragile signs, that we were still tethered somehow. Like the time I came down with a fever and he brought me medicine in bed without saying a word. Or the night I forgot to lock the back door and he got up at 2 a.m. to check the entire house. Love doesn't just vanish. Even when it's bruised and bleeding, it clings to the bones. One evening, after our 6th counseling session, we came home in silence, like always. But something shifted when Daniel walked into the kitchen and saw the dinner I had made. His favorite, pepper steak with mashed potatoes and sautéed spinach. I watched him take a bite, chewing slowly. Then he looked at me. Why him? He asked softly. I put down my fork. It wasn't about him, I said. It was about me. I felt like I was drowning in routine. I missed being desired, missed being told I was beautiful. And Marcus, he fed that part of me. But I never loved him. Daniel nodded, slowly. So you sacrificed your marriage for attention. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I sacrificed it because I forgot to protect it. We stared at each other for a long time. The air between us was heavy, but for the first time in months, it wasn't hateful. It was honest. And honesty, no matter how ugly, is sometimes the only way forward. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I ran into Marcus. I was at the grocery store, grabbing fruit for our son's school lunch, when he walked right up to me, as if nothing had happened. Claire, he said, smiling like a man who hadn't detonated my life. Been a while. I took a step back. What are you doing here? He shrugged. Had to grab a few things. I've been meaning to call. Don't. I cut him off. Don't call. Don't text. Don't come near me. He raised a brow, like he was amused. So what now? You're playing the loyal wife again. I stepped closer. No. I'm trying to be a better woman. For myself. For my son. For a man who, despite everything, is still willing to try. So go. And don't look back. I turned and walked away without another word. That was the last time I ever saw Marcus. Back home, I told Daniel what happened. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because healing only works when there are no more secrets. He listened without interrupting, then nodded once. I'm proud of you, he said. Those 4 words broke me more than any argument ever could. Healing wasn't linear. We had setbacks, bad days, silent dinners, nights I cried myself to sleep because Daniel still wouldn't touch me. But we also had progress. We started walking in the evenings again, like we used to when we were dating. We watched movies together. We laughed, real unforced laughter. And one night, I reached for his hand on the couch, and this time he didn't pull away. Months passed. One morning, I was folding laundry when Daniel walked in with our son, both of them giggling about some inside joke. I watched him tickle our boy, kiss his forehead, then meet my eyes. For the first time in nearly a year, there was warmth in his gaze. I've been thinking, he said. About what? Us. The future. Starting over. My breath caught. You mean? He nodded. We'll never forget what happened. But maybe we don't have to live in it anymore. Tears filled my eyes. I'd like that, I whispered. So we did. We took a weekend trip to the lake, just the 3 of us. We had awkward sex that felt more like a first time than a reunion. We talked about dreams again. Started making plans, not just to repair, but to rebuild. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. If you've made it this far, you know that this isn't a story of perfection. It's a story of pain, betrayal, choice, and ultimately redemption. And here's the truth. Affairs aren't romantic. They're devastating. They ruin more than just trust. They fracture your identity. But if there's real love, if there's mutual willingness, sometimes, just sometimes, you can find your way back from even the darkest chapters. I didn't deserve Daniel's grace, but he gave it to me anyway. Not because he's weak, but because he's stronger than I'll ever be. And every day since, I've made it my mission to be a woman who deserves the second chance he gave me. So if you're listening to this, and you're standing at the edge of your own mess, maybe you've betrayed or been betrayed, just know this. You are not the worst thing you've done, but you are responsible for what you do next. Choose wisely, because secrets, they never stay buried.